Hello there, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy, where humans face the unknown, outsmart the impossible, and turn every test into victory. So sit back and let the story begin.
Nobody in the Galactic Trade Council ever paid attention to the small blue planet in the outer spiral arm. It was listed in the registry under a forgettable number. The atmosphere was corrosive with oxygen. The surface was covered in liquid water that moved violently under the pull of a large moon. The dominant species had no claws, no venom, no armor plating, and no electromagnetic senses. By every measure used by the Council to rank civilizations, Earth scored at the bottom to SO when the Valith hegemony began its slow conquest of the Orion sector. Nobody thought to warn the humans that Kethfor was a trade inspector for the Council. He had visited 400 worlds in his career, and he had never once been surprised. Every species followed a pattern. The strong ones fought. The weak ones surrendered. The smart ones negotiated. It was simple math, and the math always worked. He was reviewing shipping routes near the quarantine zone when the first reports came in. The Valith had entered the Sol system with a standard pacification fleet. 40 warships, 2 carrier vessels, and a command dreadnought. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. They had sent the usual message to the planet's surface. Surrender your resources. Accept our governance. Resistance is extinction. The humans had responded with a single sentence. Come down here and say that to our faces. Kethvor had read the transcript 3 times. He assumed it was a translation error. No species with their level of technology would challenge a Valith fleet. They had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their ships were held together with welded metal and chemical fuel. It was like watching a creature made of paper challenge a fire. But the Valith commander accepted the invitation. That was the first mistake. The ground forces landed in a region the humans called the Sahara. The Valith chose it because it was empty. No cities, no visible defenses. It seemed like the safest place to establish a forward base. What the Valith did not understand was that the humans had not left the desert empty by accident. They left it empty because even humans found it difficult to survive there. The Valith were cold-blooded. Their homeworld had an average temperature of 12 degrees. The Sahara, in the middle of what humans called summer, reached 55 degrees on the surface sand. Within 6 hours, the first Valith soldiers began to collapse. The humans did not attack. They simply waited. Kethvor read the field reports with growing disbelief. The Valith commander ordered a retreat to a cooler region. The humans had anticipated this. Every cooler region on the planet was where the humans actually lived. And the humans, it turned out, had been preparing, not with weapons, not with armies, with something far worse. They opened their doors. The first Valith patrol that entered a human settlement was met not with gunfire, but with bottles of cold water. The humans offered food. They offered shade. They spoke softly. They smiled, showing their flat, blunt teeth, which the Valith initially mistook for a threat displayed. It was not a threat display. It was kindness, and kindness, as the galaxy would soon learn, was the most dangerous weapon the humans possessed. The Valith soldiers who accepted the water and food began sending messages back to their ships. The messages were not tactical reports. They were personal. They described the taste of something called lemonade. They described the feeling of sitting in shade after hours in killing heat. They described a human child who had given a Valith soldier a small stuffed animal because the child thought the soldier looked sad. The Valith commander ordered those soldiers to return immediately. Half of them refused. Kethvor put down the report and stared at the wall of his office. In 400 worlds, he had never seen a military unit fragment over lemonade. He pulled up everything the Council had on humans. The file was thin. Oxygen breathers. Carbon-based. Moderate intelligence. Short lifespan. No natural weapons. Classification. Harmless. He added a note to the file. It read, classification requires immediate review. Then he booked a transport to the Sol system. Because Kethvor had not survived 400 worlds by ignoring things that did not make sense. And nothing about the humans made sense. The transport would take 9 days. In 9 days, the Valith hegemony would send reinforcements. The humans would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Kethvor was not worried about the humans. he was worried about the Valeth, because he had read enough history to know one thing. When a species that should be weak refuses to break, when a species that has no armor stands in the open and offers water to its enemies, that species is not being foolish. That species knows something everyone else does not. And whatever the humans knew, the galaxy was about to learn it the hard way. The Valeth reinforcement fleet arrived on the 8th day. Kethvor watched it from the observation deck of his transport as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the edge of the Sol system. 120 warships, 3 dreadnoughts, enough soldiers to occupy a continent that he had seen fleets like this before. He knew what came next. Orbital bombardment, ground invasion, slavery, or extinction. The pattern had repeated across 1,000 worlds for 1,000 years. But when his transport reached communication range of the human planet, the channels were not filled with screams or surrender broadcasts. They were filled with music. The humans were broadcasting music into space. Kethvor asked the transport pilot to confirm. The pilot checked the frequencies twice and then shrugged. They are playing songs, the pilot said. Hundreds of different songs on hundreds of different channels. Kethvor sat down slowly. He had no idea what this meant, but it unsettled him in a way that warships never had. He made contact with the Council observation post orbiting the 4th planet in the system. The post was staffed by a single Melori analyst named Driss, who had been assigned to watch the Sol system because it was considered the most boring post in the sector. Driss did not look bored when Kethvor's face appeared on her screen. She looked terrified. "You need to see this," she said. She sent him the footage from the surface. The original Valeth ground force, the one that had landed in the desert, had been reduced from 12,000 soldiers to 3,000. Not through combat. Through desertion, 9,000 Valeth soldiers had walked away from their units and into human settlements. They had been fed, housed, and given something the humans called community. Kethvor watched footage of Valeth soldiers sitting in human homes, eating meals with human families, learning human card games, and sleeping under human roofs. "They are not prisoners," Driss said, her voice shaking. "The humans are not holding them. They can leave whenever they want. They do not want to leave." Kethvor felt something cold move through his body. What about the remaining 3,000? They retreated to their landing ships. They have sealed themselves inside. They are refusing orders from the fleet commander to resume operations. Driss paused. The fleet commander has declared them compromised. Compromised by what? Driss looked at him with wide eyes. By kindness, Inspector. The Valeth High Command is calling it a psychological weapon. They have classified human hospitality as a form of biological warfare. Kethvor almost laughed. Almost. But then he thought about what it meant when a military empire had to reclassify generosity as an attack, and he did not laugh at all. The reinforcement fleet took position in orbit. The new commander, a Valeth warlord named Thessic, broadcast an ultimatum to the surface. Surrender the captured soldiers. Cease all psychological operations. Submit to Valeth authority. The humans broadcast back a single message. Your people are not captured. They're guests. They are free to leave whenever they choose. But we have made soup, and it would be rude to leave before dinner. Thessic ordered the first orbital strike. The beam hit an empty stretch of ocean. The humans had provided no military targets. Their armies were not assembled. Their weapons were not aimed at the sky. There was nothing to shoot at except civilians, and even Thessic hesitated to begin a planetary genocide in full view of the Council observation post as Thessic sent ground troops. Fresh ones, soldiers who had not been exposed to human kindness. He sent them to the largest human city in the region, a place the humans called Cairo. Kethvor watched the landing from the observation post. 5,000 Valeth soldiers in full combat armor marching into a city of 20 million humans. What happened next would be discussed in council chambers for the next century. The humans did not fight. They did not flee. They lined the streets and watched. Some of them held signs with messages written in the Valeth language. Kethvor magnified the image to read one. It said, "You look tired. Do you need water?" Another said, "Welcome to Cairo. The food here is really good." A third, held by a small human child standing on the shoulders of a larger human, read, "I like your armor. It is very shiny." The Veileth soldiers stopped marching, not because they were ordered to, not because they were afraid. They stopped because nobody had ever welcomed them anywhere. The Veileth hegemony ruled through fear. Their soldiers were taken from their families as children and trained to know nothing but obedience and violence. They had never been offered water. They had never been told their armor was shiny. They had never been seen as anything other than weapons. And now, 20 million humans were looking at them like they were people that Kethvor turned off the monitor. He sat in the dark for a long time. He was beginning to understand what the humans knew. They knew that every soldier, no matter how well-trained, no matter how loyal, was still a person underneath the armor. And persons had needs that no empire could fill. The need to be seen, the need to be welcomed, the need to matter to someone not because of what they could destroy, but because of who they were. The humans were not fighting a war, they were offering a home. And that, Kethvor realized, was something no fleet in the galaxy could defeat. 3 days after the Cairo landing, Commander Thesic received a communication from his own soldiers that made him break a table with his fist. The message was not a tactical report. It was a recipe. One of his elite shock troopers had learned to make something the humans called falafel, and he wanted to share the instructions with his unit back on the ship. Thesic deleted the message. Then he deleted the next 47 messages, which included descriptions of something called football, a debate about whether cats or dogs were better companions, and a photograph of a Veileth soldier wearing a human hat with the words "World's Best Tourist" printed on it. He called an emergency meeting with his officers. "The humans have done something to our soldiers," Thesic said. "Some kind of chemical agent, a drug in the food or water." His chief medical officer, a quiet female named SYLL, shook her head. "We tested everything. The food is clean. The water is clean. There is no chemical agent." "Then explain why my soldiers are refusing to fight." SYLL was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because they are happy, Commander. For the first time in their lives, someone is treating them with warmth. The humans are not using a weapon. They're using basic emotional care. And our soldiers have never experienced that before." Thesic stared at her. "You are telling me that my army is being defeated by feelings?" "Yes, Commander. That is exactly what I'm telling you." Kethvor was not supposed to be listening to this conversation. Council observation posts were equipped with passive sensors only, and intercepting military communications was technically a violation of 17 different treaties. Driss had done it anyway. She said it was for research purposes. Kethvor did not argue. He was too busy writing his report to the council. The report was already 40 pages long, and he kept having to add new sections because the situation kept getting stranger. The humans had begun a new phase of what Kethvor was privately calling aggressive hospitality. Teams of human volunteers were approaching Veileth positions not with weapons, but with tables. They would set up the tables in open areas near the Veileth camps, cover them with food, and then sit down and eat. They did not approach the soldiers. They did not call out to them. They simply sat there, laughing and talking and sharing meals, and waited. The Veileth soldiers would watch from behind their barricades. Some would watch for hours. And then, one by one, they would come out. He always started with one. One soldier who was hungry enough, or curious enough, or lonely enough to cross the line. The humans would make space at the table without making a big deal of it. They would hand over a plate. They would smile. And that was it. Within a day, that one soldier would bring friends. Thesic tried everything. He rotated troops. He restricted communications. He threatened courts-martial and execution. Nothing worked. The humans adapted to every countermeasure with the same simple strategy. They were kind. Relentlessly, persistently, stubbornly kind. Kethvor began interviewing the deserted Veileth soldiers through remote communication channels. He asked them why they had left their posts. Their answers were remarkably similar. Point one said, "A human woman fixed a tear in my uniform. She did not have to do that. Nobody has ever done something for me without wanting something back." Another said, "They have these animals called dogs. The dogs love you immediately. They do not care that you are Veileth. They just want to be near you. I have never been loved immediately before. A third soldier, one of the elite shock troopers, said something that Keth Vor included word for word in his report. I was trained to kill since I was 4 years old. I have burned cities. I have ended species. And yesterday, a human child drew a picture of me and gave it to me and said I was her friend. I'm not going back to the fleet. I'm not going back to burning cities. I would rather die here, sitting at their tables, eating their bread, than live another day as what the hegemony made me. Kethvor saved the transcript and sat back in his chair. He looked out the window of the observation post at the blue planet below. It looked so fragile, so exposed. Any one of Thessic's ships could turn its surface to glass in an afternoon. But Thessic had not fired again after that first ocean strike. Katver understood why. Thessic was not afraid of the humans. He was afraid of what would happen to his fleet if they stayed near the humans too long. Every day, more soldiers deserted. Every day, the fleet grew weaker. Not because ships were destroyed, but because the people inside them were choosing to leave. The humans were not defeating the Valeth military. They were emptying it. And Thessic, who had conquered 11 worlds through overwhelming force, had no idea how to fight an enemy that refused to be an enemy. Kethvor finished his report and sent it to the council with a single recommendation at the end. It read, "Do not invade Earth. Do not threaten Earth. Do not, under any circumstances, give the humans a reason to visit your world and start being kind to your citizens. You will not survive it." He paused, then added one more line. "They have dogs." The Galactic Trade Council held an emergency session for the first time in 200 years. The last emergency session had been called when the Krix swarm consumed an entire star system. This session was called because of Lemonade. The council chamber was a vast ring of floating platforms, each carrying the representative of a member species. There were over 600 species in the council. Most of them had never heard of Earth. Most of them had never heard of humans. That changed in a single afternoon. Kethvor stood at the center of the chamber and presented his report. He spoke for 3 hours. He showed the footage from Cairo. He played the intercepted communications from Thessic's fleet. He read the testimonies of the deserted soldiers. And he showed the council a photograph of a Valeth shock trooper holding a puppy while a human girl braided a friendship bracelet around his wrist. The chamber was silent for a long time after he finished. The Mellori representative spoke first. "You are suggesting that this species, which has no significant military capability, has neutralized a Valeth invasion fleet through acts of generosity." "That is correct," Kethvor said. "And the Valeth have classified human kindness as a biological weapon." "Also correct." The Mellori representative sat down slowly. "I would like to propose that we never make contact with this species." The chamber erupted. Half the representatives wanted to quarantine Earth permanently. The other half wanted to establish immediate diplomatic relations. A small but vocal group of Dranaki traders wanted to know if they could import the dogs. While the council argued, Kethvor received a priority message from Driss at the observation post. He read it and felt his blood go cold. Thessic had made a decision. Unable to reclaim his soldiers, unable to complete his mission, and facing growing humiliation before the hegemony, he had chosen the only option his training allowed. He had aimed every weapon on every remaining ship at the human planet and ordered a full planetary bombardment. Kethvor ran to the communication terminal and broadcast an emergency alert to the council. The argument stopped. 600 species stared at him. "The Valeth fleet is preparing to destroy Earth," he said. "Bombardment will begin in approximately 40 minutes. The council dissolved into chaos. Emergency votes were called. Defense fleets were discussed. But Kethvor knew the math. The nearest council fleet was 2 days away. No one could reach Earth in 40 minutes. He contacted Driss. "Is there anything we can do?" Driss was crying. "No. The humans have no orbital defense. They have nothing that can stop a Valeth dreadnought." Kethvor closed his eyes. He thought about the soldier who had been given a child's drawing. He thought about the tables of food set up outside military positions. He thought about 20 million people in Cairo who had welcomed an invasion force with signs that said, "Welcome," and "You look tired." He opened his eyes. "What are the humans doing?" he asked. Driss checked her sensors. Then she made a sound that Kethvor had never heard from a Mellori before. It was something between a laugh and a sob. "They are broadcasting again," she said. "What are they broadcasting?" "Messages. To the fleet. Millions of messages from the surface. Every human with access to a transmitter is sending personal messages to the Valeth ships." Kethvor felt the ground shift under him, even though he was standing on a space station. "What do the messages say?" Driss read some of them aloud. "To the Valeth soldier who liked my grandmother's bread. She made an extra loaf for you. Please come back for it. To the soldier I taught to play chess. You still owe me a rematch. Do not blow on my planet before I beat you. To whoever is reading this on the big ship, I do not know your name, but I know you are a person. Persons deserve better than this. You deserve better than this. My name is Amara. I am 8 years old. My Valeth friend Gortek is staying at my house. He is teaching me to count in your language. Please do not hurt us. We are having a good time." Driss could not read anymore. She was crying too hard that Kethvor was not crying. He was watching the sensor data from the Valeth fleet, and what he saw made every scale on his body stand up. The fleet was breaking apart. Not from weapons fire. Not from sabotage. Ship by ship, crew by crew, the Valeth fleet was fragmenting. Vessels were powering down their weapons. Shuttles were launching from the larger ships, heading not away from the planet, but toward it. Toward the surface. Toward the tables, and the bread, and the friendship bracelets, and the dogs that Thesic's command channel was filled with his screaming orders. But nobody was listening anymore, because millions of voices from the blue planet below were saying something that no Valeth soldier had ever been told by anyone in their entire lives. "You matter. You're welcome here. Come home." And they did point one by one, ship by ship. The Valeth came home to a planet that was not theirs, to a people they had come to destroy, and were welcomed at the door like family. All except Thesic. Thesic sat alone on his dreadnought, surrounded by empty corridors and silent stations, and stared at a planet he could not conquer. Not because it was strong, because it was kind. Thesic did not surrender. He did not flee. He sat alone on the bridge of his dreadnought for 6 days, eating nothing, drinking only recycled water, and staring at the planet below through the main viewport. On the 7th day, a small human shuttle approached his ship. The shuttle was barely the size of one of his escape pods. It had no weapons. It had no shields. It was painted bright yellow, which Thesic later learned was the human color for things that were supposed to be cheerful. There was writing on the side in the human language. It said, "Cairo Community Kitchen, we deliver." Thesic could have destroyed the shuttle with a single thought. His dreadnought still had full weapons capability. The targeting system flagged the shuttle automatically and waited for his command. He did not give the command. The shuttle docked at one of the lower airlocks. Thesic watched on the internal cameras as a single human walked through the empty corridors of his ship. The human was old. Her hair was white and her back was bent. She carried a large covered pot with both hands and walked slowly, stopping sometimes to look at the Valeth writing on the walls. It took her 20 minutes to reach the bridge. Thesic did not lock the doors. He told himself it was because one old human was not a threat. But that was not the real reason. The old woman entered the bridge. She looked at Thesic, who was twice her height and covered in natural armor plating. She looked at the weapons console that could destroy her entire planet. She looked at the empty chairs where his crew had once Saturday. Then she put the pot down on the navigation table and took off the lid. "Soup," she said. "Lentil. My daughter said you people seem to like it." Thesic stared at her. "You came alone, to an enemy warship, to bring me soup. You have not eaten in a week. Someone had to come. I tried to destroy your planet. Yes, but you did not. And you have not eaten in a week." Thesic did not understand this creature. He had spent his entire life in a world where strength was everything, where weakness was death, where kindness was a trick used by the clever against the foolish. He searched the old woman's face for deception, for calculation, for anything that made sense within the rules he knew. He found nothing but a tired old woman who thought he should eat. "Why?" he asked. It was the only word he could manage. The old woman sat down in one of the empty crew chairs. She had to climb up because it was built for someone much larger than her. She settled herself and folded her hands in her lap. Because you are sitting alone in the dark, she said. And where I come from, we do not leave people alone in the dark. Fesick felt something crack inside him. Not a bone, not a plate. Something deeper. Something that had been locked tight since he was taken from his family at 4 years old and put into the training camps. Something that had hardened with every world he burned, every species he conquered, every life he ended. He did not know what it was. The humans, he would later learn, called it grief that he ate the soup. It was warm and simple and tasted like nothing he had ever been given before. Everything he had eaten in his life had been military rations, designed for efficiency, not pleasure. This was different. Someone had taken time to make this. Someone had chopped vegetables and stirred the pot and tasted it to make sure it was good. Someone had cared about the eating of it. Such a small thing. Such a devastating thing. Kethvor heard about the soup from Driss, who had been monitoring the Dreadnought's internal cameras. He added it to his report, which was now over 200 pages long and was being read by every government in the council. One elderly human female neutralized a Valith dreadnought with lentil soup, he wrote. I'm aware of how this sounds. I assure the council that I have not lost my mind. The humans are simply operating on a level of social warfare that we have no framework to understand. He paused, then deleted the words social warfare. He replaced them with social connection, because that was what it really was. The humans were not fighting. They were connecting. They were reaching across every barrier the galaxy had ever built between species and saying the same thing over and over again. You are not alone. You do not have to be what they made you. There is a place at our table for you. Fesick came down from his dreadnought the next day. He came in the old woman's yellow shuttle. When he stepped onto the surface of the planet he had tried to destroy, there was a crowd waiting for him. Not soldiers, not officials, just people, humans and Valith together. Nobody cheered. Nobody jeered. A young human man walked forward and held out his hand. Fesick did not know the gesture. The old woman, who was standing beside him, took his clawed hand and placed it in the human's palm. It is called a handshake, she said. It means you are welcome. Fesick, who had made entire worlds tremble at his name, stood in the sunlight of an alien world and held a stranger's hand and did not know what to do with the feeling that was flooding through him. The old woman knew. That feeling, she said quietly, is what it is like to be home. Fesick did not speak. He cannot, but he did not let go of the hand. And high above, on the observation post, Kethvor watched and began writing the final section of his report. The section titled, Recommendation for Humanity's Role in the Galactic Council. He already knew what he was going to write. Kethvor presented his final recommendation to the Galactic Trade Council on a day that would be remembered by 600 species as the day everything changed. The council chamber was full, not just with representatives, but with observers, journalists, military analysts, and diplomats from worlds that had never bothered sending anyone to the council before. Word had spread about Earth. Word had spread about the Valith fleet that had been defeated by bread and soup and friendship bracelets. Every power in the galaxy wanted to know what Kethvor was going to recommend. Some wanted him to recommend quarantine, lock the humans on their planet, keep them contained. A species that could dismantle a military fleet without firing a shot was too dangerous to let loose in the galaxy. Others wanted him to recommend an alliance, bring the humans into the council, use their strange power as a diplomatic tool. Let them soften the hard edges of the galaxy's many conflicts. Kethvor stood at the center of the chamber and looked at 600 species looking back at him. He had spent 40 years as a trade inspector. He had visited more worlds than almost anyone alive. He had seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct, wars begin and end. He had thought he understood how the galaxy worked. He had been wrong. I have spent 3 months studying the human species, he began. I have watched them turn an invasion into a dinner party. I have watched them melt the armor of the most feared military force in the sector with lemonade and children's drawings. I have watched an old woman bring soup to a warlord who tried to destroy her planet, and I have watched that warlord weep. The chamber was very quiet. Many of you want me to explain how they did it. You want a strategy you can copy, a technique you can learn, a weapon you can build. I cannot give you that, because what the humans did was not a strategy. It was not a technique. It was who they are. He brought up an image on the central display. It was a photograph taken by the observation post. It showed a street in Cairo. A Velith soldier in full battle armor was sitting on a plastic chair at a small metal table. Across from him sat an elderly human man in a white shirt. Between them was a board with black and white pieces on it. Chess. Both of them were leaning forward, studying the board. The Velith soldier's weapon was on the ground beside him, forgotten. The humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, Kethfor said. Their planet has earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, droughts, venomous creatures, diseases, and predators. They have thin skin, no claws, no venom, and no natural armor. By every standard we use to measure survival fitness, they should have gone extinct millions of years ago. He paused. They did not. And the reason they did not is the same reason the Velith could not defeat them. The humans survived because they learned to take care of each other. Not just their own families. Not just their own tribes. Everyone. They have a word for it. Several words. Actually, they call it compassion, empathy, love. These are not decorations in their culture. They are the foundation. Everything they have built, from their first villages to their first spacecraft, was built because they refused to let each other face the dark alone. He looked around the chamber. You are afraid of them. I understand. A species that can turn your soldiers into their friends is more dangerous than a species that can destroy your ships. Ships can be rebuilt, but a soldier who has tasted kindness will never go back to cruelty. He changed the image. This one showed the Velith dreadnought in orbit. Through the windows, you could see that the corridors were being cleaned by human volunteers. They were turning it into a community center, a space station where Velith and humans could live together while the former soldiers learned how to be something other than weapons. My recommendation is simple, Kethfor said. Admit the humans to the council. Not because they are powerful, not because they are useful. Admit them because every species in this chamber has spent its history building walls. The humans spent theirs building doors, and the galaxy has needed more doors for a very long time. He stepped back from the podium. The vote was not unanimous. The Krix swarm abstained, as they always did. The Thar Dominion voted no because they voted no on everything. 3 smaller species voted no because they were afraid, but 592 species voted yes. Earth was admitted to the Galactic Trade Council on the same day that a former Velith warlord named Thessic opened a small restaurant in Cairo. He served lentil soup. The recipe had been given to him by an old woman whose name, he had finally learned, was Fatima. The restaurant had 12 tables. There was always a line. Kethfor visited once, near the end of his assignment. He sat at a corner table and watched Thessic move between the kitchen and the dining room, carrying bowls of soup to humans and Velith sitting side by side. Thessic moved differently now. The rigid military posture was gone. He moved like someone who belonged somewhere. Fatima sat across from Kethfor. She poured him tea. It was hot and sweet and flavored with mint. You wrote the report that changed everything, she said. You brought soup to a warship, Kethfor replied. I think you changed more than I did. Fatima laughed. It was a warm sound, the kind of sound that made you feel like the universe was smaller and kinder than you thought. I did not change anything, she said. I just did what we have always done. Someone was hungry. Someone was alone. So I went. Kethfor looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his tea and took a sip. The council classified your species as harmless, he said. I changed the classification in my report. To what? Kethfor smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in 40 years. Essential, he said. Outside the restaurant, the sun set over Cairo. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. Stars appeared, and among them, visible as small moving lights, the ships of 100 species coming and going from a planet that had been ignored for 10,000 years. The humans waved at the ships sometimes. Just in case anyone was watching. Someone always was.